Friday the 13th movie rankings. And trigger warning, I'm starting with the one I like the least. If you can see already which one my least favorite is, yeah, it's this one here. If you can't handle why I don't like this movie, we'll give many reasons why I don't like this movie. I will give full detail. And if you can't handle it, then please scroll away now. It's just my opinion. And if you like this movie, then good for you. So, prior to the movie, there was a convention, not really a horror convention, it was kind of a mix of a comic/mini horror convention. Anyway, Kane Hodder was there, he was promoting the movie before it was released, and he signed an autograph for me. And it's pretty awesome because he put to Michael, Freddy is a wimp, signed Kane Hodder. Didn't think about it much at the time, but I just thought it was cool. He was really awesome. He was basically there to sell the movie, in which he did. He was saying cool things like, hey man, you're going to see Jason without his mask a lot in this movie. And I was like, cool. That's always one of my favorite things about the franchise, was the big reveal of like, what's Jason going to look like under the mask this time? So I was literally renting Friday the 13th movies since I was 5 years old. These movies were always available at the video store, and there were so many to choose from because they were literally releasing a Friday the 13th movie every year. At least so it seemed. At this point, I had seen every single film, and the first films that I saw in the theater were Friday the 13th Part 7 and Part 8, and then Jason Goes to... And you could say at this time, I was a Jason Voorhees expert. From all his costumes, all his weapons of choice, little details about him, and even the lore of the character, I already knew. Like, it was implanted in my brain. I studied the hell out of it. The day came and my best friend and I went to go see the movie, and we weren't paying attention to things like, oh, New Line Cinema now owns a franchise. We kind of weren't really paying attention to that stuff at the time, so we didn't think about it. The film starts off pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, whatever, it's interesting. Not gonna lie, I was curious to see if they were gonna write in, oh, how did Jason get from Manhattan back to Crystal Lake, and did he transform back from a child into a corpse? But then I noticed something a little small, but it kind of annoyed me already. The continuity of Jason's eye scar was already wrong. They killed him off right away, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, because, they should have figured out how to do that by now. Before I get to the obvious, what started to rub me the wrong way was the music score. Yes, the music score. It felt too different. It almost felt like it was a made-for-TV music score. Oddly enough, it was made by the same person who composed the other music. It just felt cheap or something, I don't know. So we get to the morgue scene. I thought this part was actually kind of funny, but then you know what I'm going to talk about next. So this scene, it's still stupid, it still annoys me, but it's almost laughable at this point, because why does our examiner bite into Jason's heart like if it's a Big Mac? I do not understand that. And sadly, I was feeling a very familiar feeling, because prior to this movie, I had seen Freddy's Dead, and I was feeling the exact same vibe of whoever's making this movie does not care about the franchise and does not care about the fans. Because now Jason is jumping into bodies, because yeah, he does that now all of a sudden. And we're introduced to Creighton Duke, aka Walker Texas Ranger. I actually liked him as a character. I just thought he was very underdeveloped, and I felt like, how does he know so much? But like I said, I did like him as a character. I just felt like there was something missing. And how did he know so much about the lore? So remember when I was talking about Freddy's Dead just a minute ago, I was saying how I felt like the people behind the film just did not care about the character, nor care about the franchise or the fans. And they did just randomly throw in Freddy having a daughter in that movie, like all of a sudden in one movie. Well, they pretty much did the exact same in this movie. And now all of a sudden, Jason magically has a sister. And I remember sitting in the theater and being like, no, Jason does not have a sister. I think what bothered me the most even then and even now to this day, because in the advertisements for this movie, they said, from the creators from the first film, come back to bring you the last. So back again to whoever made this movie didn't care, including the creators, because they did not do their homework or nor care to do their homework, because here is my proof that Jason does not have a sister.
Oh, my sweet, innocent Jason. My only child.
I remember 30 minutes into the movie already thinking, man, this movie's a loss. It can't redeem itself. So right before Jason jumps into this body, he decides to shave the guy's mustache because apparently he doesn't like being dudes with mustaches. The movie did have some good kills and some good practical effects usage. But like I said, at this point, I already checked out. Now Jason is going after his niece and his grandniece. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, it's copying Halloween now. After all that, Jason is reborn by a Voorhees because, yeah, sure, why not? And he's wearing his clothes. It would have been a little cooler if they at least looked like this, but who cares at this point? And he can only be killed by a Voorhees by a magical dagger because, yeah, sure. I think if anyone should get this franchise back, it's Frank Mancuso Jr. and Tom Savini. I could talk about this movie for hours, why this is my least favorite, and yes, that's why I have it in my least favorite corner right there. And before anyone comes at me saying, "Hey man, they're just trying to do something different," I get that completely. And we kind of got that with Friday the 13th Part 5, The New Beginning. I will defend this film because not only does it feel like a Friday the 13th film, it goes back to the original formula of the whodunit kind of a thing. I think this movie's awesome. I don't know why this movie gets hate. Plus, too, this one had a way better musical score. Oh yeah, one last and final reason why I don't like this movie is because Jason decides to speak, and this is what he says.
Free! Get the hell away from Red!
And the next one on my least favorite after Jason Goes to Hell would have to be Jason X. At this point, as a fan, I had already written off Jason as a character and sadly let him go. I was already thinking that they were never going to be making another Friday the 13th film because it had already been, I think, 7 or 8 years, maybe 9 at the time, and there was no talks of anything going on with Friday the 13th. I just honestly could not find anything in Fangoria magazine at the time. I remember hearing Freddy vs. Jason was still a rumor, and that had been an ongoing rumor for years at this point. In mind, the Friday the 13th franchise stopped at Friday the 13th Part 7, and I had made peace with it. And so we finally got the trailer for Jason X, and I was like, okay. I was basically thinking to myself, okay, so I already knew at this point, New Line Cinema did not care about the character, and just that, Jason is now going to be doing what every bad horror movie ends up having to do, and that is, you guessed it, go into space. Yes, just like Hellraiser, just like how Pinhead went to space, and just how Leprechaun went to space. Now Jason himself is in space, and that is bad as far as for the franchise. So yeah, this movie was pure cheese. Nothing made sense, and I was like, whatever, you're just going along for the ride. You kind of just throw everything out the window at this point. Because nothing makes sense. At this point, Jason is on Earth in the future. He's half alive at this point, and he's been captured. He gets away, but then he manages to get frozen in cryogenic freezing, along with another survivor, and they go to their spaceship with the frozen bodies, and it's funny because the spaceship itself looks like a set from like an old TV show from like the early 2000s or even the late 90s. So I'm not sure if it was like from Babylon 5 or something, but yeah, it looks like a total set from another TV show or something. So yeah, this movie is pure cheese. The dialogue is like, I was like, oh, this movie's not going to make enough money to make another sequel. But yeah, unfortunately, that was the last film with Kane Hodder, and what's kind of sad is because he was the first Jason I saw in the movie theaters. That was Part 7, and I was like, whoa, that was my favorite one that he's done, and I just feel bad because he's played the character so many times, but I feel like I've only liked him really in one movie, unfortunately. Now, some people are going to be shocked at this one, so my next one on my list, like I said, I'm starting from least favorite to my favorites. So my next on that list would have to be Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. That's probably going to be a surprise to some people, but yeah, this film was definitely not my favorite in the franchise. It's definitely one that I watched the least. It does have a lot of cool parts in it, but overall, I just was not into it. I saw this movie in the theater as a little kid. I remember my mom took me, and I was still off the high of seeing Part 7 in the theater, maybe like a year or two before. And that one, I was just like, whoa, that was my first Friday the 13th film that I saw in the theater. And, just the overall look of Jason in that film was just so awesome. I liked all how he looked like a zombie. He was very deteriorating. His clothes are ragged. It was just awesome. That was my first Kane Hodder film, and I loved the way he portrayed the character. So starting with this one, I was like, cool. It's picking up kind of where the previous film left off with Jason in the lake again, after getting killed by zombie dad. And so when the film starts off, and he's revived, I was like, the continuity was off in the film, just because Jason's clothes were magically back. He had almost a brand new set of clothes, and he had some punk rock gloves. I was like, okay. And coincidentally, the people on the boat that he decided to kill had a hockey mask laying around, and it was almost like identical to the one that he had previously. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty convenient, but whatever. So yeah, I remember being disappointed with this one just because just some things didn't sit well with me. I think this was the first Actually, I will say this is the only one that I did not like from the Paramount Pictures era. Just because, yeah, like things didn't make sense. I would say like, so Jason finally leaves the lake. He somehow goes from a boat on the lake to the ocean. I don't know how that happens, but it did. So he's on the boat. Why he would jump ship to another ship, I don't know. And then the fact that, you know, he's had to swim across the ocean to get to it. But yeah, this one just didn't sit well with me. I just remember there was a lot of weird little changes. I was like, okay, Jason is now teleporting, because he would literally be at one end and then all of a sudden be at the other. And I was like, since when does Jason teleport? Is that a new power that he has? I was like, okay, that's kind of silly. But I remember each of the kills that he did, they were almost kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, but they were almost like metaphorical. I mean, he kills the girl that's the rock star. He kills her with her own guitar. The girl that's doing coke, he gets a mirror and kills over the mirror. So like every kill in the movie had like its own thing. Whatever, you know, person was into, that's how they died. So I was like, that's kind of funny. I was like, I don't know if that was done on purpose or just kind of worked out that way, but always thought that was a little corny. I didn't care for the backstory of our final girl, how yet she is connected to the lake also. You know, she saw Jason as a kid under the water. I was like, that's kind of not working with me, but whatever, you know, it'll make the story go along. You know, most of the movie takes place, I would say all the movie takes place on the boat, which is fine. It works for the most part, but you know, it's what I always thought was kind of funny is that it's a graduating class on a boat, and yet we only see like 10 kids at the most in the movie. So as the boat sinks and the survivors are on a life raft, and you know, there's no Jason. And I remember when they finally get to New York, and you know, they get off at the dock and they're walking around, and then Jason pops up from the docks, and I'm like, was he swimming this whole time in the ocean, or was he walking on the ocean floor? I was like, okay, whatever, but all right, fine. So at this point, Jason's in New York, and I remember just being like, how does he know his way around so well? I was like, he knows his way around New York a little too well. I was almost thinking, like, shouldn't he be lost? Shouldn't he be, like, staring a little more at everything? Shouldn't he be, like, lost in an alley somewhere? Or no, maybe get hit by a cab or something. Now, the ending where Jason is Jason's in the sewers and he knows his way around. And the scene I remember just were, like, the toxic waste and the fact that, you know, he's talking, I guess, and then he drowns, and then he melts, and then, you know, even when he gets the acid in his face and he goes like, "Rrr!" I was like, oh my Lord, this is cheesy. And then even when he had his mask off, that was something that was always really cool to me. I always liked the big reveal of Jason's look without the mask. I was like, oh, what's he going to look like right now? And I remember being very disappointed because he looked like a jack-o'-lantern. And then, yeah, so Jason gets absorbed by acid and then turns into a child, and then our two survivors decide to go walking in New York and not go to the police, not report anything, and just kind of like go on their touristy way. Okay, now to number 9 on my list is the Friday the 13th reboot. People are going to be asking, why would you like this one over the other ones? I will actually say this. I feel like there was actually some effort put into this movie. I'm not really big on how they combined 1, 2, 3, and 4 into one movie, because I feel like those should have been their own separate story like we had previously. And I'm not going to lie, the performance from Derek Mears was actually pretty awesome in the film. I actually had been thinking about this for a while before I saw the movie, and I was like, maybe Jason doesn't need to be a zombie anymore. I feel like when Jason's a zombie, there's not a whole lot of stakes. It's like you're just dead. And I'm not going to lie, between Derek Mears playing Jason and I think Sam Winchester actually carried the movie. I do feel a little more effort was put in this film compared to Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X. And also, like I said, I felt like Derek Mears kind of sold it for me. Without the hockey mask, I did not like that look at all. Now, I will say at this point on my list, these are all the ones I rewatch. And these are all the ones I enjoy. Number 8 on my list is Freddy vs. Jason. This one feels more like a Freddy movie more than a Jason movie. And I will say Kane Hodder definitely should have been in this film. I honestly wasn't into this version of Jason at all because I felt like he literally portrayed this Frankenstein's monster. Even the costume, they're very similar to each other. The character basically felt too monotone to me, if that makes any sense. But what sold it for me is when Freddy actually started interacting with Jason in his dreams and started drowning him as a kid. That's where I thought the character started really working again. I do like the angle of Jason being afraid of water, but he's been in the water plenty of times. He's actually walked the ocean floor. He swam in Crystal Lake a couple times. He's walked in Crystal Lake, so he's not even scared of water anymore. Could have worked, though. Now, number 7 on my list might be a little controversial, but it's Friday the 13th Part 5, The New Beginning. I'll be completely honest, I love this movie. I know a lot of people hate it because Jason is not in the movie, but this movie feels more Friday the 13th than any of the sequels after Part 7. I feel like this movie went back to the roots of the original film, or it's more of a whodunit kind of a movie. Yes, it does lead you on to thinking that Jason is in the movie. However, we do get Ghost Jason. We get some really great kills in this movie, and also this might be the last Friday the 13th movie that consistently stayed gory like the previous films. It felt like every Friday the 13th movie after this was butchered by the MPAA or whatever they're called. Like I said, I like how it goes back to the roots of the original film. I do like the revenge angle that this movie has. I do like how the film kind of picks up where the fourth one left off with Tommy going crazy. And now he's starting to see Ghost Jason. I do like how Tom Morga plays Ghost Jason as well. Also, I do like the angle that they were trying to go with, that Tommy might possibly end up being a killer as well. That is an angle I think they probably should have left in, that Tommy possibly has homicidal tendencies. You know what we also do get in this film is Reggie the Reckless. What an awesome movie hero this character was. Like Friday the 13th Part 4, this film also had likable characters, and you didn't want these people to die because majority of these characters in this film were actually kind of memorable and overall good characters. 5 definitely makes you want to ask some questions because I want to know, where did Roy get his costume for one? And was Roy himself possessed by Ghost Jason? Because Roy was pretty powerful in this movie. So at the end of the movie, they go through Roy's wallet and they kind of put it all together that Joey was his son. However, they find newspaper clippings of Jason from his younger years when he was a kid, when he first drowned. However, they have a photo. They have a close-up photo of Jason like if he was posing, like if he was Bigfoot walking across the stream. How in the hell did they get that photo? Who took that photo? And did they die? I'm sure they must have died, so I'm very curious how that photo got released. Number 6 on my list is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. This was the first Friday the 13th movie I saw in the theater. I was probably about 6 or 7. And at this point, I was a Friday the 13th expert. I had rented all the movies, so I was all caught up. And let me tell you, seeing Jason like this, I was so happy. The makeup effects, his overall rotted look, the fact that we could see every wound that he's ever had from the franchise. I was in special effects heaven, and this was the first time I got to see Kane Hodder portray Jason, and I loved his performance in this movie. At the time, the whole psychic Carrie kind of thing didn't bother me. It doesn't really bother me now. It's definitely a lot more cheesy. I remember seeing Jason without his mask, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. Kane Hodder did something very simple and subtle, but it worked and it sold the costume even more. He was moving his mouth, so it did not look like he was wearing a rubber mask. What this film had in special effects, it did lack in blood because of the MPA, but I love this movie. And on to number 5 on my ranking is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. You're probably thinking you didn't like the guy from Freddy vs. Jason because he acted like Frankenstein's monster, and Jason comes back to life like Frankenstein's monster. Touché. But CJ Graham and Jason Lives does not move like Frankenstein. To me, it always felt like Jason was just doing some push-ups, you interrupted him, and he decided to power walk and chase you. CJ Graham has a very intimidating, kind of like muscular walk. This was actually my first Friday the 13th film that I ever watched. I rented it from the video store, and this movie blew me away. This had the fun 80s horror comedy vibe, kind of like Return of the Living Dead, had that same kind of vibe to it. We don't get a lot of blood in this one, but we get some great kills. We get some Alice Cooper, and this is the only time that we actually get to see Camp Crystal Lake open, and this might be the only Friday the 13th movie without any nudity. To number 4 on my list is the original Friday the 13th film. So yeah, you can imagine how confused I was as a kid watching these films out of order, but when I got to see this one, I got to see the origin of Jason, also got to see how the origin of Pamela Voorhees, his mother. I got to see what drove her to this, the motivation and everything behind it. This film is very raw, and that's something I really like about it, especially now that I'm older, but when I first saw it as a kid, this kind of scared me because it felt very raw and kind of real. And there's a lot of subtle things that are being said throughout the movie that they don't show you, but they tell you. Like when the girl's hitchhiking in the beginning of the movie, the truck driver is telling her, hey, a lot of crazy things have been going on here. You guys should leave. He's like, the lake's been bad. There's been fires. A kid drowned. All these things. And it's like, oh, that's kind of cool that they wrote that in, but not show it. So I am down to my final 3. And what you can see is Friday the 13th Part 2, Friday the 13th Part 3, and Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. I'm not sure if I'm the only one that thinks of this way, but I feel like Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 are almost like their own trilogy because they are so connected together because they are within days from each of the films. So I feel like I can't review just one, so I'm going to have to go through Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 right now. And these are the 3 that I watched the most. So in Part 2, we get Jason as a young adult, and he's wearing a bag over his head. Just like I said for Part 1, how it felt very raw, this one feels pretty much the same. And I do like that Jason looks like he's been living in the woods and kind of on his own and finding whatever he needs to survive. I know the timeline in these films is a little off, so I'm not exactly sure how old he is. Always the question of how did he find Alice? Did he look her up in the phone book? Did he walk all the way across town or across the city with his mom's head? Kind of wonder how all that happened, but it kind of just gets the beginning going. And once he gets back to the camp, which is another question, did he carry Alice's body all across town back to his shack? That is something I definitely wondered also. But we get some great kills and some great makeup effects in this movie. We get a really awesome final girl here. Even Paul is not useless in this movie. He manages to take on Jason a few times. But the question is Paul even dead? And what I do like about this film is that Jason is alive. He is not a walking zombie. He's a living, breathing person, and he's living alone in the shack in the middle of the forest. Is he supernatural? Probably. Does he have a lizard demon living in his body? No, because that's just stupid. He probably just has the powers of a wraith or something. But Ginny defeats Jason. However, Jason comes back at the end, or does he? I will say I do like the look of Jason in this movie. I do like that it's raw and it's very rural looking. There is a theory here. Since Part 3 continues right after Jason was taken down, he gets up and kind of crawls out because his shoulder's wounded. So there is a theory that this here is entirely a dream sequence. And that Jason never really looked like this without the bag on his head. That he actually just looked how he did in Part 3, bald and just disfigured. If you believe that theory that none of this part happened and it was all just a dream, then Paul is probably still alive. And Jason was making his way through the forest, heading out to the grocery store, where he ended up. On to the next movie, because Jason crawls out of the shack and makes his way through the forest and ends up on another killing spree. And on his way to Higgins Haven. To me, this one is so awesome because I feel like we start getting the more standard look of Jason. I do like that we get a quick glimpse of Jason still wearing his overalls, and it looks like he's about to pick out his standard outfit. And yeah, while he was making his way through the forest, he managed to grow a foot and maybe pump a little iron. That's something I do like when Richard Brooker came into the character, is that he had that sturdy and a real strong look. I always thought that look was just really awesome. And even though this one took place after Part 2, it feels like this one was still made in the 70s. I don't know, it feels like it's very 1970s. It doesn't feel like it's 1980s. It feels more like a 1979 movie. So after Jason gets some new threads and makes his first kills in this movie, he goes to Higgins Haven to hang out. And since he's basically hanging out at Higgins Haven before anyone even gets there, it kind of feels like a home invasion movie. Like he's already there and they kind of just interrupted his recuperation time. The characters here are fine. They're just on their way to Higgins Haven. Chris Higgins, the final girl in this movie, she's not bad or anything. She's not one of my favorites. I do think it's a little too coincidental that she met Jason before, but I do kind of like that angle that, Jason was just a predator running through the woods and she just happened to bump into him. But these characters I kind of like a little bit more. I swear when Ali was going to fight Jason the first time, he had the best reaction. He was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to get you. And finally he's turns around and he sees Jason like, shit. I will say I wish Ali had a better fight with Jason because it would have been pretty cool to see those two go toe-to-toe. And quick fun fact, Ali's character was one of the characters that influenced me to make up the game, the underrated movie hero trivia game. I don't know, to me in this film, Jason comes across very massive and solid. He almost seems like a walking tree trunk. Jason was temporarily defeated, and that was supposed to be the last one, but since these movies were very inexpensive to make at the time, they were making a lot of profit, so they had to make a Part 4. And so we get Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. And this one, to me, kind of seals the deal because I felt like this was a trilogy. So we pick up immediately after Part 3, and Jason makes his way out of the hospital. I don't know how many people he killed in the hospital, but he probably killed more than 2. We get memorable characters in little shorts and some memorable kills. Jason is finally defeated by Trish and her brother Tommy. And Jason seems to be staying dead this time because Tommy repeatedly hacks at him. And that might be the only way that Jason was able to die. So these are my top 3, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4, and I think of these as a trilogy.